Hi, I'm Linda. 3 days after major surgery, barely able to walk, my mother told me to pack up and leave. Why? Because my sister's bridal shower needed the space. I didn't argue. I bled onto their carpet and they shut the door in my face. They said I was dramatic, ungrateful, invisible, but I started keeping records. And when I found out they gave away my grandmother's veil, erased me from photos, and buried the only person who ever protected me, without telling me, I stopped asking for love and started asking for answers. Now they're begging. But tell me, when your own mother throws you out like clutter, what exactly is left to go back to? I wasn't expecting much from my time back home. I just needed a place to recover, a roof, a quiet corner, a few days to breathe. But 3 days after surgery, I realized how foolish that hope was. The house still smelled like lemon polish and too strong coffee. I'd grown up with that smell. Familiar, yes. Comforting. Not anymore. My mother's voice echoed down the hallway, sharp, clipped, directing someone about napkin colors and floral arrangements. I lay still for a moment, blinking against the morning light seeping through the blinds. My abdomen throbbed with every breath. The stitches tugged when I tried to shift, a cruel reminder that my body was still broken open inside. I wasn't supposed to move much, the doctor said. No lifting, no walking long distances, definitely no stress. But here I was, already stressed out by the scent of wedding prep and the muffled sound of my sister's laughter. Isolde's laughter always had that high, glassy tone, like someone who thought they were better than the room but wanted the room to love her anyway. The door creaked open without a knock. "Mom, I told you," I started. "It's me," she cut in. Verity, standing in the doorway in her favorite beige cashmere set, holding a clipboard and not meeting my eyes. "You need to pack your things." My stomach dropped so fast, I almost forgot the pain. "What?" She stepped inside like it was a routine announcement. "The event team needs to set up in here by tonight. We're transforming this room." "I just had surgery." Her eyes flicked to my midsection, then back to the clipboard. "I know. That's why I gave you 3 days. But Isolde's shower is in 4. We can't have your situation bringing down the mood." My brain scrambled for words, for logic, for decency. "I can't even walk straight yet." She let out a sigh like I was exhausting her. "Linda, you're always so dramatic. You're not dying. Where am I supposed to go?" "There's the garage. We'll put a cot out there for tonight, and you can figure out something else by tomorrow." I stared at her. This was the woman who used to kiss my forehead when I scraped my knee, who made grilled cheese sandwiches when I was sick. Now she wouldn't even let me heal under her roof. "You can't be serious," I said. Then came the words I'll never forget, sharp, smooth, final. "Don't lie there like a patient and ruin your sister's luck." That line didn't just land in my gut, it detonated something old and tired that had been sitting quietly inside me for years. Isolde breezed in a moment later, holding up a mock floral arrangement. "Linda, do you mind not bleeding on anything? The florals are all pastels." She laughed. Mom didn't correct her. They moved on, discussing catering. I sat frozen, breath caught between rage and heartbreak. The sun moved across the room in slow betrayal while I tried to stand. My back protested, the muscles near my stitches screamed. I leaned on the dresser, one foot sliding carefully into a slipper. I packed, not with speed, not with pride, just with the steady hands of someone who'd finally heard the answer to a question she'd been asking since childhood. Do I matter here? No. I moved like a ghost in my own room. My sweatshirt still hung on the doorknob. The nightstand still had the cup Isolde left there for hydration, now filled with dust. My suitcase wheezed open, old and judgmental. I put in underwear, pain meds, a heating pad, my charger. When I bent to grab my toothbrush, I felt a slow burn in my lower belly, and then something warm. Blood. I sat down hard, dizzy, not much but enough to remind me I wasn't healed, and they didn't care. Every step toward the door felt like walking deeper into a memory I never agreed to keep. I passed the living room where Dad used to watch baseball, the kitchen where Mom would press orange slices into my lunch bag. Now she pressed flower petals into centerpieces. I stopped at the threshold. She didn't even glance at me. "Where are you going?" she asked, still scribbling in her planner. "Somewhere I won't be erased." Her pen stopped moving, but she didn't look up. Isolde peeked out from the backyard, already posing with the flower arch. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. I hadn't slept much. The cot they moved into the garage was nothing more than a fold-up chair with a blanket thrown over it. No pillow, no apology. Just, "You'll be fine," from Isolde before she walked off like she was tossing a treat to a stray dog. Around 5 in the morning, my back was numb, and the dull ache in my abdomen had turned into a low, pulsing throb. I sat up slowly, letting my feet hit the cold concrete. The garage smelled like old paint and fertilizer. In that quiet hour, the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like I'd been buried alive. As I shifted, trying not to tear anything inside me, I remembered something from when we were kids. Picture day at church. I was maybe 9. The photographer told us to group together. I stood beside Isolde, but Mom said, "No, no, Linda, stand behind her. You don't want to block her light." That phrase, "block her light," was like gospel in our house. I never did again. By the time the sun pushed through the cracked garage window, I decided to make my way to the kitchen for something warm. I moved slow, careful not to make noise. The last thing I needed was Verity scolding me for traipsing around like a ghost again. As I passed the dining room, I saw it. A white linen-covered table set up like a display. On it lay the bridal shower photo album, still open from the night before. There were pens nearby, likely for guests to sign love notes, maybe quotes like, "Sisters are forever," or "Family first." I paused. I shouldn't have looked. I already knew better, but I did. Page after page, smiling faces, balloons, backyard candles, mock engagement shoots. Isolde in the center of every frame like she was born with a spotlight above her. And then came the family shots. I remembered that barbecue. I stood beside my cousin, holding a red plastic cup, laughing. It was one of the few photos I actually liked of myself. In the album, that same photo was there, but I wasn't. The crop was clean. My arm was barely visible. The next one, our 4th of July picnic, I was in that one too, or at least, I had been. Now it was a perfectly curated shot of Verity, Dad, Isolde, and some neighbor's baby. No Linda, just air where I had been. I swallowed. My hands were cold. I turned the page again, another one gone, another memory rewritten. When Verity came into the kitchen minutes later, balancing a tray of lemons and fake eucalyptus leaves, I waited. "Nice album," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. She didn't even pause. "Oh, thank you. I hired a graphic editor to make it look sharp. Clean lines, modern feel." "I noticed I'm not in a single group photo," I added. This time, she looked at me, briefly. "Well, some of them just looked better that way. You were kind of in the back. It didn't make sense, composition-wise." Composition-wise, like I was clutter. "Don't overthink it," she added, already half turning away. I should have said more, should have shouted, flipped the table, burned the whole thing down, but I didn't. Instead, I walked out to the front porch to get some air. That's when I heard it, Verity's voice, cheerful and rehearsed. "Oh, she's on a little solo retreat," she said to our neighbor Ruthie, who'd stopped by with flowers. "You know Linda, always a bit of a lone wolf, needed some alone time to reflect before things get busy again." I froze behind the porch column. Ruthie chuckled. "Well, I hope she finds whatever she's looking for." Verity didn't miss a beat. "We support her, of course. Healing journeys are important, especially after everything. After everything. What a nice way to sum up being exiled from your own home while bleeding through gauze." I went back to the garage and sat in that metal chair like it was a throne for forgotten people. My journal was tucked into the overnight bag I kept by my feet. I pulled it out, flipped past a dozen unfinished entries, and started a new page. "I've been erased before," I wrote, "but this time they did it with intention and skill." I didn't cry. There weren't tears left. What I had now was something else. Quieter, sharper, resolve. They didn't know it yet, but I was already writing the next chapter. I didn't eat anything that morning. My stomach couldn't hold food. Maybe it was the stress. Maybe it was the codeine. Or maybe it was knowing that every breath I took under that roof made me feel less like a daughter and more like an inconvenience with a pulse. I'd been up since before the sun, sitting on the edge of the cot in the garage, pulling my hoodie tighter, even though the air was warming up outside. Inside me, though, everything still felt cold. They were going to start decorating around 9 a.m. That gave me an hour. I didn't want to be seen. Not as I was, not dragging a cheap duffel bag full of clothes and bruises, not limping through a house where my pain was treated like a stain on their perfect little setup. I packed slowly, carefully. I rolled up what I could, shoved in what I had the strength to carry. My jeans, a few shirts, my toothbrush still had dried toothpaste on it from yesterday. I wrapped my heating pad in a towel and tucked it against my back as I zipped the bag. By the time I opened the garage door and stepped into the hallway, the lights were already on. The smell of floral cleaner hit first, too sharp, too bright for how my body felt. I tightened my grip on the bag strap. My right side flared with heat as the stitches tugged beneath my skin. I breathed through it. No one was around. I just needed to make it down the hall and out the front door. The bag snagged on the wall once. I bent down to adjust it and instantly regretted the motion. My head spun. I felt a slow slide inside me, not painful, but wrong. I tried to straighten, but my knees gave out. The carpet rushed toward my face, and I landed hard. The world didn't go black. It went beige. The exact beige of that plush new carpet Verity had insisted on for the photo area. My hand pressed into it, and I felt it, wetness spreading under my palm. I turned slightly, saw the crimson bloom against the pale threads. Not a lot, but enough. I pushed myself onto my back, biting my cheek to keep from making a sound. If they saw me like this, they'd think I was trying to make a scene. Even bleeding felt performative in that house. Footsteps. I tensed. Verity's heels clicked in sharp little bursts down the hallway. She came around the corner, holding a clipboard and a coffee cup. We locked eyes. I opened my mouth. I think I need... Maybe I should go to the ER. She looked down at the carpet, then back at me. Her mouth flattened. Her hand tightened on the coffee cup. And then, without saying a word, she turned and walked away. I heard the quiet thunk of the bedroom door clicking shut behind her. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Instead, I waited. 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. The wet spot beneath me cooled. I rolled onto my side, pressing my forearm into the carpet to push myself up. My knees shook as I stood. I left the bag where it was. I'd come back for it. One step, then another. I reached the garage door and leaned against it. The weight of the moment landed harder than the fall. Back on the cot, I sat for a long time, listening to the sounds of movement inside the house. Laughter, a blender whirring. Isolde's voice rising about lighting angles. They've always shut the door, I thought. I just never bled enough for it to show. I pulled my phone from the bag and opened my contacts. My thumb hovered over names I hadn't touched in months, years. Then I scrolled down and tapped one. Marla. The voicemail beeped after 2 rings. Hey, hi, it's me, Linda. Listen, if that guest room's still an option, I think I need to take you up on it. I can be out of here by tonight. Call me back if it's not too late. I'd really appreciate it. I hung up, then stared at the phone. I wasn't even sure what time it was anymore. The day had bent and folded in on itself. I reached down and felt the hem of my shirt, stiff with dried blood. That spot would probably never come out of the carpet, but I hoped they'd try. I hoped they scrubbed until their knees hurt. I laid back down on the cot, facing the ceiling. My stomach ached, but something deeper did too. And it wasn't just the wound that had reopened. I didn't move for hours after leaving the voicemail. The garage stayed quiet, except for the occasional creak from inside the house. Someone walking past, laughing too loud, slamming a cabinet shut without a care. I sat there listening, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of mothballs and resentment. By mid-afternoon, my body had stopped aching from the fall. What remained was something deeper, something that couldn't be reached by a heating pad or ibuprofen. It was the realization that I was done begging to be seen, done trying to contort myself into the kind of daughter they could tolerate. It was still light outside when Marla texted, "Keys are under the frog statue, doors unlocked, come anytime." I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard, wondering if I should write something back. But what was there to say? Thank you for giving me more kindness in a sentence than my own family had shown in weeks. Instead, I stood. I didn't rush. I gave myself the dignity of moving slowly, of not letting them rush me one last time. Inside the house, everything looked polished and fake. I passed through the kitchen where the fridge still held a dry erase board that read, "Welcome home, Isolde," in sparkly marker. Next to it, a photo of her in a white dress at age 6, beaming. There were no photos of me. At the foot of the stairs sat the wrapped gift I'd sewn with my own hands. A quilt made from scraps of fabric, pieces of old dresses, curtains from the bedroom we used to share, even a square from Dad's old college sweatshirt. I'd started it when I thought this wedding would be something we'd share, something to remind her, remind them, that I had a place in this family too. I hesitated, then carried the quilt into the foyer and placed it on the entry table with a simple note. For Isolde, congratulations. I turned to leave and nearly collided with their voices. They were in the living room. The door was ajar. Seriously, what is this? Isolde's voice cut through the air, shrill. It looks like it belongs in a nursing home. Then Verity. Just toss it. We'll say we never got it. The words sliced through me clean. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I stood there, invisible as always, and absorbed it. I walked into the kitchen, tore a sheet from the notepad near the phone, and wrote my goodbye with a calm I hadn't known I had. To my family, I wish you joy tomorrow. I'll be somewhere quiet, healing. Please don't look for me, unless it's to remember I was here. I left the note under the ceramic fruit bowl. As I walked out the front door, the sky had already begun its shift into twilight. There was a softness to the light that made everything look gentler than it was. Marla's truck pulled into the driveway just as I stepped outside. She didn't say much, just nodded once and reached over to open the passenger door. I slid in, keeping my head low, not out of shame, I just didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me leave like I was being chased out. The ride was quiet, the roads familiar. I watched the houses blur by, houses that had always felt like other people's stories, warm, messy, loud stories that didn't belong to me. Marla's place sat tucked behind a row of overgrown hedges. The guest house was modest, a single-story structure behind her main home, but it looked like sanctuary. Faded blue siding, wind chimes on the porch, and a little potted plant that had definitely seen better days. She parked, turned off the engine, and finally looked at me. "You get the soft pillows," she said. "That's non-negotiable." I laughed. The sound surprised us both. Inside, the air smelled like lavender and old books. The couch was worn in, the rug had a stain in the corner no one had bothered to scrub out, and I loved it all instantly. I dropped my bag by the door and just stood there. "You need anything?" Marla asked from the kitchen. "Just a moment." She nodded and left me alone. I sank into the couch. My body sighed into the cushions like it had finally been given permission to exist. For the first time in weeks, I let myself rest, not because someone gave me permission, but because I claimed it. And when I finally did look back toward the door, I realized something strange. I didn't miss the house. I missed the version of me who used to believe I ever belonged there. I woke up to the scent of coffee I hadn't brewed and a knock that didn't demand anything. Marla was already in the kitchen, humming along to a folk song on the radio, pouring tea into a chipped mug that read, "World's Okayest Boss." I sat up on the small couch with a stiffness that had nothing to do with the mattress. "Morning," she said, setting the tea on the end table beside me. "I forwarded some mail from your job. It came yesterday." I nodded, reached for the stack, and gave her a grateful smile. No questions, no probing, just space. The envelopes were mostly junk. Discount coupons, a flyer from a dentist I'd never seen. Then I saw the bank logo. My bank. A credit statement. I opened it out of habit, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. Halfway through the page, a charge caught my eye. Event Furnishings, Inc., $248.20. I blinked. That was the week I gave Verity money for what she called emergency car repairs. She said she didn't want to dip into the joint fund before the bridal shower. I remember her exact words. "It's not like I'm asking for a handout. I just need a little buffer." I had $700 left in my checking account at the time. My post-surgery prescriptions alone cost over half that. I'd skipped one refill and stretched pain meds by cutting them in halves. I pulled out my phone and stared at her contact for a long moment before tapping call. When it went to voicemail, I didn't hesitate. "Hey, Mom. Hope the chair rentals were worth it. I had to cancel a follow-up appointment because I'm out of cash. Just thought you should know what your buffer cost." I ended the message without waiting for the beep. Marla had stepped out back to water the hydrangeas. I sat alone with the steam rising from my tea, my jaw clenched. Scrolling through Instagram didn't usually tempt me, but I opened it that morning out of morbid curiosity. I hadn't looked at Isolde's page since the eviction. First photo, a boomerang of champagne glasses clinking together. Next, her in a silky white robe, grinning like life had never once said no to her. Then I saw the veil. It was tucked into her hair like an afterthought, lace trailing over her shoulders. Ivory. Delicate. Familiar. I clicked the photo and zoomed in. There it was, at the hem of the veil, almost invisible, but not quite. 2 tiny embroidered initials, LD. My grandmother had hand-stitched them into the corner the year she promised the veil to me. "One day, baby," she whispered, You'll wear this when someone worthy walks you down the aisle." I stared at my initials on a woman who had once told me my taste was too sentimental to be chic. I didn't call. I didn't text. I simply set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. I don't remember when Marla came back in, but I do remember the way she didn't say anything. She just sat on the other end of the couch with her own mug and turned the radio down low. At some point, I must have sniffed too loudly because she glanced over and asked, "Bad news?" I shook my head. "No, just familiar." She waited. "It wasn't even about the veil," I said finally. "It was what it represented. She gave away something I was never allowed to deserve." Marla didn't offer pity. She nodded once and said, "They always do that to the ones who remember things." The air in the room settled again. I spent the rest of the morning going through the rest of my mail, updating my insurance info, organizing receipts. It felt grounding, like I was patching the seams of my life. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and started drafting a letter, not to my family, but to myself. A contract, a reminder. I do not return to places that ask me to shrink. The words sat on the screen, sharp and real. Whatever came next, I wasn't walking backward. Sunday afternoons used to mean laundry, slow coffee, and watching the neighborhood kids run barefoot on warm pavement. But today, I sat on the couch in Marla's guest house with the blinds half closed, watching my cousin's Instagram live stream. I hadn't planned to look. I truly hadn't. But curiosity is a persistent itch, and I needed to know what my absence looked like to them. So I opened the app, scrolled past sponsored ads and baby announcements, and there it was, Dallin Women Through the Years. The banner spanned the entire backdrop of Isolde's bridal shower, white cursive on soft pink chiffon, surrounded by printed photos, all clipped to string lights like memories hung out to dry. The video panned across each photo: my mother's wedding photo, Isolde's high school graduation, Verity's retirement party. One shot stopped me cold. It was from my 16th birthday. We had a barbecue in the backyard, and I'd been standing in the middle, holding a cupcake. I remember because I had to beg Mom to let me wear the dress I bought with babysitting money. In this version, that center spot belonged to Isolde. My image had been erased, not cropped, edited, as if I had never been there at all. I stared at the screen for a long time before texting Marla. "They erased me." Digitally this time. She replied in less than a minute, "Which means they're scared you still exist." I locked the phone. My fingers trembled, not from sadness, from rage that felt too steady to burn out quickly. I needed air. I stepped outside with a mug of warm water and sat on the porch, listening to the buzz of a nearby lawnmower and the distant bark of a dog. Sacramento's late spring had settled into that golden, lazy warmth that made everything seem softer than it really was. The buzz of my phone pulled me back. A Facebook message request from Ruth Chandler, my grandmother's old neighbor. The message read, "I'm so sorry to hear about your grandmother, hun. I assumed you were there yesterday. She looked peaceful. May she rest." I reread the message 3 times. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I typed, "Wait, what happened?" Then deleted it. What was the point? They hadn't told me. No call, no email, no obituary link, nothing. I walked back inside, locked the door behind me, and sat on the edge of the bed, hands clenched tight in my lap. My breath caught like something had hooked into my chest and tugged hard. I opened my phone again and scrolled through saved voicemails. There was one, from 4 months ago. Grandma. Her voice, gentle and warm, came through like sunlight through stained glass. "Hi, baby. Just calling to check on you. I know the holidays are weird this year, but I made your favorite. Call me back, okay? I listened to it twice before saving it again. There was no funeral invite because there was never an intention to include me. The woman who held me through every broken ankle, who taught me how to braid my own hair, who slipped $20 bills into my pocket, just in case, was laid to rest without the one person who loved her back in the same way. They didn't just erase me from a photograph. They erased me from goodbye. When the sobs came, I didn't fight them. I let them tear through me like they'd been waiting for weeks to be let out. I curled into myself on that worn-down bed and cried until the sheets were damp and my throat ached. Eventually, I sat back up. The clock on the microwave blinked 3:47 p.m. I wiped my face, stood, and crossed the room to the small desk tucked under the window. There was a manila folder labeled Legal Options where I'd kept insurance info and medical bills. I pulled it open. Among the pages, I found a flyer Marla had given me earlier that week. At the time, I'd brushed it off. Now I unfolded it. Property Inheritance Review, free consultation. I circled the name of the attorney. I wasn't sure where this would lead, but I knew I couldn't let silence bury me the way they buried her. The morning after the bridal shower was unusually quiet in Marla's guest house. Even the birds seemed subdued. I sipped lukewarm tea, scrolling through emails, when a new message from an unfamiliar address appeared. Request for clarification, timeline discrepancy. I blinked. Then I read the name below it. Heath Calder, Isolde's fiancé, or ex-fiancé as I'd soon find out. But before that bomb dropped, something else was brewing across town. Heath had run into Avery Cohen at a networking brunch that morning. They weren't close, just two people in the same orbit of mid-level professionals and community fundraisers. Avery was chatty, casual, recounting highlights from the bridal shower. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "I still can't believe what they did to Linda. Kicking her out right after surgery? That was brutal." Heath's fork paused midair. "Wait, what?" Avery blinked. "You didn't know?" "Oh, I thought you would have, since you're marrying into the family." Heath left early. No dessert, no small talk. By noon, he was calling Verity. She answered with her usual practiced warmth. "Heath, what a lovely surprise. I hope Isolde told you how thrilled we all are." "Why did no one tell me Linda had surgery?" There was a pause. "She didn't want to make a fuss," Verity said smoothly. "You know how dramatic she can be, always wanting to be the center of attention, even in recovery." "She got evicted 3 days after a medical procedure," he replied, voice clipped. "And you thought that was acceptable?" Verity's tone changed instantly. "You have no idea the context here. Linda has always exaggerated. She's been difficult since she was a child." But Heath wasn't new to the Dallin dance. He'd heard the stories, seen the whispers exchanged behind closed doors. What he hadn't seen, until now, was the extent. That evening, he called Marla. She didn't tell him much, only confirmed what he already suspected. "Linda's not a victim, Heath, but she was treated like one, and you know the difference." 24 hours later, Isolde received a single text. "I can't marry into this. I'm sorry." She tried calling, left voicemails, sent long paragraphs filled with half blame, half begging. "What did she tell you?" "This isn't fair. She's manipulating you." But Heath didn't respond. Back at the Dallin house, Verity was livid. She called me while I was folding laundry in Marla's guest room. I let it go to voicemail. Then she tried again. On the third call, I picked up. "Linda," she started, voice tight but rehearsed. "This has gone too far. Whatever you told Heath, whatever twisted version of events you gave him, it's ruined everything." I didn't say anything. "You need to clear the air," she continued. "He's confused, hurt. This doesn't help anyone, least of all Isolde." I took a breath, calm, even. "I didn't tell him anything," I said. Avery did. Funny thing about the truth, it has a way of escaping, even when you lock the doors, she scoffed. So you're just going to sit back and watch us fall apart? You threw me out for centerpieces, Mom. Now sit in your empty aisle. She went quiet. Then the line disconnected. That night, Marla brought out a bottle of champagne she'd been saving. We didn't toast. There were no speeches. She poured a glass, handed it to me, and sat down across the table. I held it for a moment. I didn't toast to their downfall, I said, voice soft. I just stopped drinking to my own erasure. Marla nodded. That's reason enough. Outside, the wind picked up. A gust pushed against the window, rattling the frame like it wanted to come in, but I didn't move. I wasn't running anymore. Tuesday morning came with a soft gray sky and that kind of stillness that feels more like warning than calm. I dressed carefully, dark jeans, a button-up that didn't wrinkle too easily, flats I could walk confidently in. The envelope in my tote bag felt heavier than it was. Inside, highlighted copies of my grandmother's will, dated bank statements, and email printouts, proof I'd never planned on using, but kept anyway. Call it instinct. Call it survival. Verity's text the night before had been brief. Let's put the past behind us. Just family. Come by and talk. If I didn't already know better, I might have believed her. I pulled into the driveway just past 10. The gardenia bush by the front porch looked overwatered and drooping. Ironic, considering how little actual care anything got around here. The front door opened before I knocked. Lowell stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes already averted. Your mother's in the kitchen, he mumbled, stepping aside. The house smelled of citrus cleaner and yesterday's floral arrangements. It tried to mask the tension clinging to every surface, but it wasn't fooling anyone. I followed the sound of clinking glasses to the dining room, where Verity sat at the head of the table, a pen and folder already in place. Isolde sat across from her, unusually silent, scrolling through her phone. Her perfectly straight posture felt forced. Linda, Verity said, standing with arms open like she might attempt a hug. I stayed still. You asked me to come. She gestured to the chair across from her. Let's sit. This won't take long. I slid into the seat, keeping my tote bag close. Verity smiled, practiced and professional. We're refinancing the house. Just a little shuffle, nothing major. The bank needs all named parties on the deed to sign off on the new terms. She pushed a stack of papers toward me. This is just a waiver, standard. Won't change your name on the paperwork, just clears the way for processing. I glanced at the document, then back at her. You want me to give up my share? It's not like you've contributed, Isolde muttered without looking up. Verity shot her a glance but didn't correct her. I reached into my tote, pulled out my folder, and laid it on the table. Quiet, controlled. Inside, proof that I had paid rent for nearly 7 years while living here. Bank transfers made directly to my mother's account. Emails where she promised to reimburse me for pregnancy-related expenses and never did. A printed copy of the will that left the house to all surviving grandchildren in equal share. Isolde stopped scrolling. Verity's smile twitched. Linda, there's no need to escalate this. We're family. No, I said, voice steady. You've made that word mean nothing. She leaned forward. What do you want? Money? An apology? I shook my head. I want you to know that you don't get to rewrite this part. You already erased me from photos. You will not erase me from this deed. I stood, pulled a yellow highlighter from the folder, and dragged it across the line on the will that mattered most. Then I slid the copy across the table. This is mine. You don't get to take it. Not this time. Verity slammed her palm on the table. You're tearing this family apart. I picked up my bag. No, I'm revealing what it already was. Lowell watched from the hallway, still silent. As I reached the front door, Isolde called after me, her voice shaking, not with guilt, but with fury. "You always ruin everything." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The wind outside smelled like dry earth and possibility. I walked to my car without looking back. My legs didn't shake. My gait didn't hesitate. I wasn't limping anymore. Inside the glove compartment, my phone buzzed with a new message from Marla. "You did it?" I replied with a single word. "Yes." Then I drove away, not to escape, but to keep building what they tried to burn. 2 weeks passed, and I didn't realize how quiet healing could sound until it became my daily soundtrack. No slammed doors, no clipped instructions, just the gentle rustle of leaves outside the window and the hum of my old fan turning slow circles above my bed. I woke that morning in my little apartment near 28th and P Street, bathed in the kind of light that felt like a second chance. The walls were still half bare, the rug a thrift store find, but none of that mattered. It was mine. I didn't have to apologize for how I kept it. No one would rearrange my belongings or decide what space I was allowed to occupy. After dressing and feeding the small plant I'd rescued from Marla's porch, some kind of succulent that refused to die, I took my usual walk to the Sunday farmers market. It had become my quiet ritual, 5 blocks, round trip, just enough to get fresh air and feel the city stretch its limbs beside me. Halfway there, near the corner bakery, I spotted a little girl spinning in circles on the sidewalk. Her floral dress flared as she twirled, giggling, while her mom clapped and cheered her on. I stopped, not out of nostalgia, just something deeper. The dress was nearly identical to the one I'd begged to wear when I was 9, the one my mother looked at and said, "That style doesn't suit your figure, Linda." Back then, I didn't know what she meant, but I understood enough to feel small, to feel ashamed. And yet, here was this child, loud, laughing, radiant, and no one told her to shrink. I smiled, not with bitterness. It was the kind of smile that comes when a wound finally turns to scar tissue, still visible, yes, but no longer painful to touch. When I got back to the apartment, my phone was blinking. One missed call, one voicemail. "Dad." I hesitated, thumb hovering over the play button longer than necessary. I wasn't sure what I expected. Probably nothing. But curiosity has a way of sneaking back in once the anger cools. His voice was softer than I remembered. "Hey, Linda, it's Dad. I was wrong. I didn't know how to stop her. I should have said something. I hope you're okay." That was it. No apology, no excuse, but also no denial. And in that space, between the lines, I heard something rare. A man who finally saw the role he played in my silence. I didn't call him back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I saved the voicemail. It felt like closure, even if it wasn't redemption. Later that afternoon, Marla stopped by with her usual offering, a paper bag of baked goods and a gallon of sweet tea that was definitely too sweet. She didn't knock, just came in, the way people do when they mean it. We sat on my second-hand couch, legs tucked beneath us, tea sweating on the table between us. The room was quiet, but not heavy, just the right kind of stillness. She glanced around, taking in my framed photos, me and a college friend at Yosemite, a candid shot of me and my grandma in her garden. "You're making a life here," she said. I nodded. I thought I needed a family. Turns out I just needed space to grow. She didn't answer, just reached over and squeezed my hand. As evening rolled in, Marla left with a leftover muffin in hand and a warning to drink water before bed. I locked the door behind her and wandered into the kitchen. The overhead light buzzed faintly, casting a warm glow over the modest countertop. I ran my fingers over the edge of the sink, then down to my side. The stitches were gone now, healed, but the scar remained, a faint silver line across my lower belly. It wasn't ugly, it wasn't shameful, it was just there, a quiet reminder of what had been taken and what I'd taken back. Some wounds stay visible, others don't, but both teach you how to protect the skin beneath. I turned off the light, the apartment humming gently behind me, and stepped into the night, knowing exactly what I left behind, and finally, what I was walking toward. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones fought in silence, where the deepest wounds aren't from strangers, but from the people who should have protected you. Linda didn't need revenge that shouted, she chose justice that echoed. So let me ask you, have you ever been pushed aside by your own family, only to realize you were never meant to belong? If this story hit close to home, tell us your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories like this one. Hi, my name is Astara. At my 34th birthday, my parents made me wear a glittered paper crown that said, "How to Grow Up." Guests laughed, my sister toasted, and I stood there, smiling, because that's what I was raised to do. But that night, I found out they'd emptied my savings account. And the next morning, my childhood was stuffed into a trash bag and left on the curb. They said it was time I learned to stand on my own. What they didn't know was I already had, so I have to ask, what kind of family throws you away, then begs you to save them? And when they do you? Or do you finally walk away? I hadn't even turned off the engine yet when I noticed it. 3 cars I didn't recognize, all parked at weird angles across the gravel like no one cared who could get out later. My fingers lingered on the key, but the radio had already cut off. The house looked the same as always, but something in the air felt different. I took a deep breath, checked my lipstick in the rearview mirror, and forced a smile. Charlottesville in early spring could be unpredictable. The dogwoods were blooming, the air had that mix of pollen and promise, but I knew better. I'd been through enough birthdays under this roof to know that celebration didn't mean celebrated. As I stepped out and walked up the porch, the front door creaked open before I could knock. It was Aunt Helen. Her lipstick was brighter than usual, and her eyes did that thing, scanning me top to bottom like she didn't mean it. "Well, look who's here," she said, as if I hadn't RSVP'd. "Surprised you made it." "Good to see you too, Aunt Helen." Inside, the smell of catered food was strong. Steak sliders, something cheesy, and too much perfume. Laughter spilled from the living room. I waved at a few cousins, nodded at Vera's church friends, and noticed Callista's people had already set up camp near the wine. Not one person looked surprised to see me. And I drifted into the dining area, scanning the place cards on the tables. Vera's friends. Thorne's colleagues. Callista's crew. My name wasn't on any of them. I looked over at Mom. She was fluffing napkins, lips moving fast with some guest. I stepped closer. "Hey, Mom, I don't see a seat with my name." She glanced at me briefly, her tone too bright. "Oh, sit wherever, darling. You're always so flexible." I stood there for a second, purse still in hand, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Everyone else had a space assigned, but I was expected to float. Just like always, convenient, optional, never quite anchored. I picked a chair at the back near the hallway, tucked in beside the coat rack, and quietly watched Callista bask in her crowd. Dad laughed a little too loud at someone's story. I kept one hand on my glass of water like it might ground me. Then I heard it, the unmistakable ting-ting of Mom's wine glass. "Everyone, can I have your attention for just a moment?" The room hushed. "Today we celebrate our youngest turning 34, she said, gesturing toward me like I was a prize on a game show. "Astara, come up here, sweetie." I hesitated, set my glass down, and walked toward her, trying to read the room. Some people clapped half-heartedly, others just smiled politely. "Let's make this fun," Mom chirped, pulling something from behind her back. A paper crown. It was glittery, handmade. Callista's work, no doubt. But what made my breath catch was the bold, black lettering written across the front. "How to Grow Up." Laughter. A few gasps. Someone even whistled. Before I could say a word, Mom leaned in and plopped it gently on my head. "There," she said, smoothing my hair like I was still 8. Perfect. I froze. Dad chuckled from his seat. Well, it's about time, don't you think? I wanted to tear it off. I wanted to scream, but my hands didn't move. My face didn't twitch. I just stood there, heart pounding, skin hot, teeth clenched behind a practiced smile. I tried to speak but stopped. Instead, I gave a tight nod and turned. As I walked back to my corner chair, I caught a few guests looking away. Embarrassed? Or just tired of pretending this wasn't exactly who they thought I was? Callista raised her glass toward me like a toast. I didn't return it. I sat down, felt the crown dig slightly into my scalp, and wondered how it had come to this. 34 years old, and still being mocked like a child who missed curfew. I whispered to no one. "Excuse me for a minute," I said, and stood up. No one stopped me. I made my way down the hallway, past the powder room and into the guest bathroom. It was still painted seafoam green, still had the same coral print towels I hated as a teenager. I locked the door, turned on the faucet, and stared into the mirror. The crown still sat on my head, tilted slightly, casting a faint shadow across my forehead. Maybe they were right. Maybe I never grew up. Maybe I was still that girl who asked for approval and never got it. Maybe I was always too soft, too different, too invisible. Or maybe they just never let me. I reached up, adjusted the crown gently so it sat perfectly centered. Then I smiled. Slow, deliberate, unrecognizable, even to me. This wasn't humiliation anymore. It was fuel. This is the last time I stand here wearing anything they put on me. It wasn't a dramatic exit. I didn't slam the door or throw the crown down in protest. I simply stepped out, adjusted the paper tiara on my head like it was made of gold, and re-entered the living room with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The fake kind you wear like lipstick, bold enough to distract, shallow enough to wipe off. By the time I returned, Callista was already holding court in the gift-opening circle. She sat in the center like a debutante at her own cotillion, surrounded by neatly stacked boxes, wrapped in expensive paper and embossed ribbon. Her tone was cheerful, confident. The room glowed around her. Mom gestured toward me with that same polished hostess grin. "Astara, come over. We haven't forgotten you." I walked forward slowly, like I was approaching a dentist's chair, every step rehearsed but reluctant. A small square package was handed to me. Vera leaned in slightly, lowering her voice for effect. "Just a little something to guide you, sweetheart. Thought it might help." I took it, careful not to tear the paper too fast. Inside was a book. Bright yellow, mass-market paperback, glossy. The title, 7 Steps to Self-Reliance. I stared at it. Then I noticed the receipt, still tucked inside. Full price? No. It had a red sticker on it. Clearance bin. $4.99. I held it up with both hands like a trophy. "Thanks," I said, tone as even as I could manage. "Looks inspiring." Dad didn't even look up from his phone. The laughter continued around Callista's corner of the room, now opening her second gift, some luxury spa certificate. I watched as she held it up, and everyone clapped, like she'd just published a novel or saved a whale. I returned to my corner of the room quietly. That moment cracked something open. I thought about all the birthdays in this house, years of effort to be presentable, likable, invisible enough not to cause trouble, but visible enough to be acknowledged. Callista got a piano when she turned 13. I remember because the whole living room was cleared out for it. Guests came by just to hear her play one song she barely knew. For her sweet 16, they rented a boat. There were fireworks, a DJ, a slideshow of her baby pictures projected onto the dockside screen. For mine, a planner, color-coded tabs, and a driving lesson with Dad where he spent most of the time on his phone, answering emails. It wasn't that they didn't give me gifts, I remember thinking. They gave me tools, like I was born to repair, not to imagine. "Okay, everyone," Mom's voice rang out again. She tapped her glass with a fork. "We have one last treat, a trip down memory lane." She dimmed the lights. The TV flicked on, and then, like a highlight reel made by someone who'd edited me out, the video began. Callista twirling in a dance recital, Callista graduating with honors, Callista blowing out candles with frosting on her nose over and over again. A polished, gleaming version of our family's past. I appeared once, blurry, in the background, in a striped shirt I never liked, not centered, not named. If you blinked, you'd miss me. Someone near me whispered, "Wasn't this supposed to be for both daughters?" Mom laughed. "Oh, honey, Astara never liked the camera." That wasn't true. I had loved being in photos, until I noticed I was never given the prints, until I realized my face didn't make it onto the walls. I stood up and quietly walked to the kitchen. No one followed. I stood at the sink and turned on the cold water. I didn't need to wash my hands, but it gave me something to do. Something that didn't require me to smile, nod, or pretend that being erased in slow motion was okay. The faucet dripped rhythmically. Outside the window, dusk had settled over the backyard. The wind pushed a hanging swing gently. I used to sit on that swing for hours, pretending I was somewhere else. I let the memory in without warning. My 12th birthday. They all forgot. Mom claimed she was busy with budget deadlines. Dad was in Atlanta for a conference. Callista had cheer practice and couldn't skip just for cake. It was my grandmother who saved me that night. She showed up with a store-bought cupcake, a plastic candle, and a quiet smile. We sat in the kitchen, just the two of us. She didn't say much, just lit the candle and whispered, "I see you." That moment meant more to me than any party. Now, in this same kitchen years later, I dried my hands and stared at my reflection in the darkened window. They called it growing up. They said I needed direction, but the truth was, they just never wanted me to go anywhere they couldn't control. I exhaled slowly, not defeated, not crushed, tired of being edited out of my own life. I didn't linger in the kitchen, just enough time to let my breath settle, to tell myself I wasn't going to cry. Not tonight, not again. I dried my hands, took one last glance at the flickering lights beyond the window, and stepped back into the hallway. The noise had shifted slightly. Less laughter, more the kind of talk that floats around people who've had too many appetizers and just enough wine to feel important. The smell of coffee had started creeping through the house. Someone must have turned on the pot in the dining room. I followed the trail, pausing when I passed the hallway mirror. My reflection looked put together, almost like a guest. Neat blouse, pressed slacks, subtle jewelry. There was nothing out of place, except me. I walked into the living room just as Aunt Becca was opening a small box from Vera. A set of gold-rimmed coasters, probably a re-gift. She was beaming anyway. Then it happened. A woman I vaguely recognized, someone from Dad's office maybe, approached me with a half-empty tumbler. She held it out like I was waiting for it. "Could I get some more ginger ale? I think the fridge in the garage has some." I stared at the glass in her hand. For a moment, I thought maybe she was joking, but her expression was blank, expectant. "I'm sorry, are you talking to me?" I asked. She blinked. "Oh, aren't you one of the servers?" "No, I'm the birthday girl." Her face flushed instantly. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. You looked so efficient." Before I could respond, Vera cut in smoothly from across the room, laughing like she'd rehearsed it. "That's our Astara, always moving, always pitching in. She never liked sitting still, even as a kid." The woman smiled awkwardly and backed away. I still hadn't moved. My hands were curled into fists at my sides. Efficient, server, background character. I sat down on the edge of a chair near the fireplace, not bothering to check if it had a name card. A few people looked over, but no one said anything. Dad was on his second glass of red. Callista, naturally, had her own orbit, with half a dozen people angled toward her like plants toward sunlight. Then came the card ceremony. Mom clapped her hands lightly. "Let's pass the birthday cards now. Astara, sweetie, open yours first." I didn't want to. I already knew it wouldn't matter. But I nodded, reached for the slim envelope with my name written in Vera's flowy cursive. I opened it. Inside was a pastel card with glittery tulips. Generic. I flipped it open and stared. "To our dear Callista, happy birthday. We love you." There it was, black ink. No corrections, no second thoughts. I didn't speak. I just held it open for an extra second, long enough to let the silence settle like dust. "Oh my goodness," Vera gasped. "I must have grabbed the wrong one. That was meant for your sister. Let me—" "No need," I said, folding it slowly. "It happens." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Dad shift in his seat. He wasn't surprised. If anything, he looked annoyed, like the card had exposed something they preferred to keep unspoken. I placed the envelope on the side table, next to a vase of flowers Callista had apparently picked out for herself. Tulips, again. The room moved on. More cards were passed. More polite chuckles. My name was mentioned once or twice in passing, always in the context of doing her own thing, or keeping busy with numbers. Eventually, I slipped outside. The patio was quiet, a string of lights still blinking along the wooden railing from some previous celebration. It was cooler now, the kind of chill that seeps through silk and settles on your skin like judgment. I sat on the steps, pulling my legs up slightly, arms resting over my knees. I could leave right now, I thought. Walk down the driveway, call a ride, vanish into the night. Would anyone notice? Would anyone care? And if they did, would it be because I was gone, or because I left without permission? I thought about when I was 9 and ran away for 6 hours. Took a peanut butter sandwich, a flashlight, and a blanket. Hid under the neighbor's deck. They didn't notice until dinner. When I came back, Vera asked if I was done playing games. No one hugged me. No one asked why I left. They were just upset that they had to microwave my plate. That kind of absence sticks with you. Not because it's loud, but because it's quiet. The kind of silence that builds a wall between you and everyone else, brick by brick. I watched the lights through the glass door. Callista was laughing again. Dad raised his glass. Mom fluffed her sweater. And me? I was out here, unbothered, unwanted, unseen. The thing is, I didn't want a seat at their table anymore. I wanted my own table. One where I didn't have to explain myself, shrink myself, apologize for existing too quietly or thinking too loudly. The anger didn't rise this time. It didn't burn. It settled, solid, grounded. They had mistaken me for a server. They had handed me a card with the wrong name. They forgot me before I had the chance to forget them. And it wasn't personal. Not to them, anyway. But it had shaped every corner of my life. I stood up slowly, letting the cold air settle over me like armor. I wasn't done yet, but I was done pretending. If they could misplace me in a card, what else had they erased? From outside, the house still glowed like a picture-perfect family postcard. Golden light spilling through the windows, laughter and clinking glasses faint behind the walls. But as I walked back in through the side door, I felt none of it. Just the weight in my chest, pressing in, slow and steady. Most of the guests had trickled out. The volume had lowered, the air turned heavier with wine and fatigue. Callista was lounging on the couch, feet curled up, sipping champagne as if it were any other Saturday night. Dad stood by the fireplace, swirling a glass of red, deep in a quiet conversation with one of his golf buddies. Mom had her usual hosting smile, even with her shoes off now, gesturing toward leftovers, as if feeding people validated her motherhood. I made my way toward the kitchen to grab a glass of water, something cold, clean. I needed it more than I thought. As I stepped back into the living room, I saw Dad wave me over. He was holding a manila folder, thick with paper. "Hey," he said, casual but with that tone. The tone that always preceded a favor disguised as a decision already made. "Just a quick thing before you head out. Some paperwork." I blinked. "Paperwork?" "Nothing serious," he assured me, handing over the folder. "It's about the cabin property upstate. Just some temporary custodial stuff. With everything getting shuffled, it's easier if the documents are under one name for now." "Yours?" I asked. He smiled without answering. Mom chimed in behind me. "It's just a custodial reassignment, honey. You'll still be listed. Don't overthink it." My fingers ran over the edges of the folder. It wasn't sealed. I opened it and flipped through the first few pages. It was legal language, dense, passive voice, intentionally vague. But I'd handled enough contract work to spot a transfer when I saw one. The ownership wasn't being held temporarily, it was being restructured, out of my name. Why now? I asked slowly. Why tonight? Dad exhaled like I'd asked the wrong question. Astara, it's not a big deal. We're just trying to keep things streamlined. Because I'm so disorganized? I replied, softer than I intended. Mom laid a hand on my arm. We just want what's best for everyone. Callista already has management experience, and she lives closer to the cabin. It's logical. Logical, I repeated. I could feel my pulse in my neck. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out instinctively. Bank alert. $3,200 withdrawal. Rose Celebration Group Catering. I stared at the screen. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. Then I opened the app. It was from my checking account, the one I used for personal savings. Not the joint one we'd long since closed, the one only I had access to, only me, or so I thought. I turned toward Mom, the folder still open in my hands. Did you use my account to pay for this party? She blinked, surprised I'd ask in front of Dad. We needed to book things quickly, she said, lowering her voice. And you weren't returning texts. I figured it wouldn't be a problem. We'll pay you back. That's not the point, I said. Dad stepped forward. Astara, come on. You're part of this family. We all give. I was never invited to give, I said, voice trembling now. Only expected to. That stopped them for a second, but not for long. You're making a scene, Dad muttered. This is exactly what we were afraid of. Afraid of what? I asked, my voice steadying. That I'd notice? He looked down at his glass. You're too emotional to handle this kind of responsibility long term. It's nothing personal. Mom nodded. It's just, you don't think things through? You internalize everything and then blow up. That's why we've always tried to help guide you. By excluding me? I asked. We're not excluding you, she said. We're just prioritizing what's practical. Is that what you call it? I smiled. Practical? The word hung between us. Silence, again, the kind I'd grown up with. The kind that meant we're done here. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I see, I said. I handed the folder back. Don't worry. I won't sign anything tonight. Dad shrugged. Suit yourself. But don't delay this too long. The paperwork is time-sensitive. I walked out without another word, heading to the staircase. In my old bedroom, everything still looked like a snapshot from a past I didn't ask to keep. Faded posters, a dresser that still creaked, an old corkboard with tacks but no photos. I sat on the bed and opened my laptop, typed into the search bar, how to remove your name from family assets legally. Then paused, deleted the phrase. Typed again. Independent estate representation lawyer near me. Click. I bookmarked the top result. They taught me the cost of independence. I was ready to pay it. The upstairs hallway still smelled like lavender linen spray and furniture polish. Familiar, controlled, and suffocating all at once. I walked toward my old bedroom, moving automatically. No emotion, no thought, just the muscle memory of years spent doing what I was told. I was looking for my coat, maybe a moment of silence. What I found instead was two women I didn't recognize standing in the middle of my room in their underwear. One of them jumped, clutching her blouse to her chest. Oh, sorry, we didn't think anyone was coming up. The other, halfway through zipping up a cocktail dress, gave a sheepish grin. Your mom said we could use this room to change. Hope that's okay. It wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Because what else do you do when your childhood bedroom has become a dressing room for your sister's friends? My bed, which once held diary entries and late-night homework sessions, was now covered in handbags and coats. The framed photo of Grandma and me had been shoved behind a shoebox. My jewelry box, the one with the little dancer, was cracked open. Empty. I didn't speak, just turned around and closed the door behind me, slowly and quietly. My hands shook, but my steps didn't. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the clinking of glasses and the occasional burst of laughter filled the space again. It was almost midnight, and the party was winding down, at least for those who weren't still basking in the glow of Callista's curated charm. In the living room, Vera raised her glass for what I assumed was the final toast. Her voice was smooth, rehearsed. To family, she began, and to all of us continuing to grow, evolve, and support one another in finding our paths. She turned toward me with a glint of performance in her eyes. Especially our youngest, Astara. May she discover the direction that best suits her. Some guests smiled politely. Thorn nodded, lifting his glass half an inch. Callista sat back like a queen whose crown couldn't be touched. That was it. I walked to the center of the room without planning to. My heels sounded louder on the wood floor than they probably were, but maybe that was just my pulse in my ears. The microphone was still resting on the speaker stand. I picked it up. My voice came out clear. Calm, not shaky, not small. Thank you, I began, for showing me what growing up looks like. A few people chuckled, unsure where this was going. It looks like having your name misspelled, your bank account used without asking, your childhood bed turned into a storage space. It looks like being remembered last and blamed first. Now, silence. It means learning to give without ever being asked if you wanted to. It means having your worth measured by how well you stay quiet. Vera's smile was frozen now. Thorn shifted in his seat, crossing one leg over the other like that would somehow shield him. I've spent years thinking something was wrong with me, that I wasn't ready or focused enough or bold enough to be part of this machine, but I finally realized the machine was never built for me. I glanced around the room, pausing for the weight of it to settle. I'm not angry anymore, I added. I'm just awake. And with that, I placed the mic back on the stand and walked toward the front door. No one stopped me. I grabbed my coat from the hook and stepped out onto the porch. The air had cooled since earlier. The sky above was full of stars, quiet, watching. Behind me, the party noises resumed after a minute, though more tentative now, like someone had turned down the volume on the family show. I was halfway down the driveway when I heard footsteps. Wait up, Callista called out. I turned around slowly. She was barefoot, holding her shoes in one hand, wine glass in the other. You didn't have to do that in front of everyone, she said, not angry, just annoyed. I did, I replied. Mom's gonna spin it. You know that, right? She'll make it sound like you're going through one of your episodes again. I nodded. Let her. She's been narrating my life for decades. I just took the mic back for 5 minutes. Callista sighed. You know, it's hard for her. She doesn't always know how to love you the way you want. I looked her in the eye. It's not about how she loves. It's about how she controls. Callista didn't argue, just shrugged. Well, you did what you had to, I guess. I unlocked my car, opened the driver door. She lingered. You leaving town again? Not this time, I said, but I am leaving them. She didn't respond right away. Then, softly, it's easier said than done. I got in the car and closed the door gently. She stayed at the edge of the driveway for a moment, then turned and walked back. As I drove toward the main road, my phone buzzed. A text. Grandma. You did good, baby. I saw everything. I pulled over to the side of the road, tears stinging my eyes, but not from sadness, from something else, something quieter, like being believed. I typed back. Thank you. Then I sat for a long moment with the engine running, watching the headlights carve out a path ahead. That was the last time I left their house as their daughter. The sun hadn't fully risen when I pulled into the driveway. The grass glistened faintly with dew, untouched, like nothing had happened the night before. From the outside, the house looked peaceful, unchanged, like a family home should. But I knew better. I'd learned by now that appearances were just another trick they'd mastered. I didn't text or call. I didn't want a conversation. I just wanted to collect the last of my things, quietly, and leave. When I knocked on the door, Vera opened it without a word. Her robe was cinched tight, makeup half done. She folded her arms and stood in the doorway like a gatekeeper. You've said enough, she murmured. Get what you need and go. I didn't answer, just nodded and stepped past her into the hallway, my heels silent on the carpet. Every step forward felt like walking through quicksand, familiar but heavy. I climbed the stairs slowly, as if giving myself time to breathe before facing whatever version of closure they'd decided I deserved. When I opened the door to my old room, I froze. It was empty. Not stripped bare, but gutted. The closet door hung open, hangers rattling against each other like bones. My boxes were missing. The corkboard I'd left above the desk was gone. Only the nails remained, embedded in the wall like they'd been driven there to hold more than just photos. I walked in cautiously, scanning the space like it might still hold pieces of me I hadn't realized I was leaving behind. The dresser drawers were open, half empty. My grandmother's recipe tin, gone. The pair of journals I kept stacked under the bed, not even a trace of them. I turned and walked back downstairs, fists clenched, blood pounding. Mom was in the kitchen, pouring herself a second cup of coffee. She didn't even look up when I entered. "Where are my things?" I asked, calm, measured. She didn't flinch. "We assumed you wouldn't be back after last night. Callista helped me clear the room this morning." I walked past her, out the front door. That's when I saw it. A large black trash bag, half hidden behind the recycling bin, slumped at the curb like a corpse no one wanted to claim. I opened it. Inside, my photo albums, pages torn slightly at the binding, my favorite sweater from college, still faintly carrying the scent of jasmine detergent. A notebook filled with my grandmother's handwriting, her cursive so delicate it always felt like it could vanish if handled too harshly. Everything that had held weight in my life was now garbage. I walked back into the house, fury boiling beneath my skin but held together by sheer restraint. "You threw my life away like it meant nothing," I said. Vera finally turned to face me, eyes narrowed. "No," she replied. "We threw away the things you refused to let go of. You want to grow up? Then stop clinging to the past. Stop acting like trash." For a second, I didn't say a word. I just stared at her. Then Thorne appeared in the hallway, dressed in his usual weekend uniform, pressed slacks, and quiet disapproval. "You want independence?" he said, his voice low but cold. "Here. Take all of it." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The intent was razor sharp. They didn't want me out of the house. They wanted me erased from the family. I stepped back toward the door. "Don't worry," I said, almost softly. "I'll take it all, including every reason to never come back." And then, without looking back, I closed the door behind me. The drive back to Arlington was a blur. The trash bag sat in the trunk like a silent passenger, heavier than it looked. At one point, I pulled over just outside of town, rolled down the window, and let the wind hit my face. I wasn't crying. I thought I might. I thought the finality of it all would break something open. But it didn't. Instead, I felt stripped, empty in a way that wasn't sad, but strangely clean. When I got home, I didn't bring the bag inside. I left it in the trunk and walked straight to my apartment, dropped my keys on the kitchen counter, booted up my laptop. I didn't even take off my coat. I opened a new tab and typed, "Estate Legal Representation, Independent Family Dispute Resolution, Arlington, VA." Links popped up. I clicked on the first one, then another. I wasn't rushing. I was steady, surgical, because when someone tells you to disappear, and you do, but with purpose, that's not surrender. That's strategy. My phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Callista. I watched it buzz until it went silent. She didn't leave a voicemail. I didn't expect her to. I sat down at the kitchen table, back straight, breathing even. My hands trembled only slightly as I began filling out the online intake form. Name: Astara Vey. Email: Primary concern: family financial manipulation, estate exclusion. I paused, then added a line at the bottom. Additional context: estrangement initiated by parent action. Seeking full separation. I hit send. A confirmation popped up, and then I stared at the screen, quiet. One tear rolled down my cheek. Just one. Then I wiped it away, stood up, and made tea. No second tear came. They wanted me out of the family. I'd give them exactly what they asked for. A year passed faster than I expected, but it didn't pass quietly. In the early mornings, I built spreadsheets from scratch. At night, I drafted proposals for clients who'd been denied funding more times than I could count. I poured myself into work, not to forget the past, but to carve something real from the space it left behind. By spring, I had clients up and down the East Coast, mostly women running small businesses, nonprofits, or breaking away from family-controlled trusts. I rented a small office downtown in Arlington, nothing fancy, just clean lines, bright walls, and a second-hand desk I refinished myself. A corner shelf held the framed note from Grandma I'd found in that garbage bag. Being invisible isn't the same as being powerless. Some mornings I'd stare at it with coffee in hand, feeling every word settle into my skin like armor. I never wore the crown again, of course, but I didn't throw it away either. I kept it in a drawer at the back of my filing cabinet. Not out of nostalgia, out of clarity, like a scar you no longer hide. The day everything shifted again was a Tuesday. I remember because it had been an unusually quiet one. I was reviewing a financial model for a startup in Alexandria when my phone buzzed. Callista. I stared at the screen for a second, debating whether to answer. It had been nearly 9 months since I'd blocked her number, then unblocked it, then blocked it again. But this time, curiosity won. I picked up. "Hey," her voice came through, tight. "I know this is awkward, but we need to talk." I stayed silent. She rushed forward. "It's Dad's company. It's gone under. We didn't plan right. There were some bad investments, and the restructuring didn't go the way it should have. They're at risk of losing the house." I closed my laptop gently, voice flat. "What does that have to do with me?" "They need help. They need you, Astara. You know how to fix this stuff. You've worked with family trusts. You've seen situations worse than this." I leaned back in my chair. "And now I'm convenient. They're scared. Mom won't say it, but she's crying all the time. And Dad, he won't even admit it's over. You're the only one who knows how to help." I looked out the window at the small green tree I'd planted last fall. It was still bare, but growing. "They made their choices," I said calmly, "and I made mine. We're still family." "No," I said, sharper now. "That ended when my journals were in a trash bag and you watched it happen." She went quiet. I could hear her swallow, then a long sigh. "I'm not asking you to forgive them," she said, "but I thought you'd at least care enough to stop them from losing everything." I almost laughed. "Everything? They lost me, and you didn't blink." The call ended shortly after. I expected that to be the end of it. Quiet, awkward, done. But they weren't finished with me. Not by a long shot. The first sign came 3 days later when a former family friend, one of those distant country club types, posted a thinly veiled Facebook status. Funny how some people forget where they come from once they get a little success. No names, but my name didn't need to be said. Then came the letter. Vera posted it to her church newsletter and on her neighborhood association board. "It is with heavy hearts that we share how our daughter, who was raised with values and faith, has chosen not to support us during our time of difficulty. We continue to love her and pray she remembers the importance of family." I read it while eating lunch at my desk. I didn't react. Not at first. I just stared at the screen, spoon paused halfway to my mouth. The same tone, the same false compassion, making herself the victim once again. But what came next hit deeper. A local radio station, one Dad used to guest on as a financial advisor, aired a segment titled "When Inheritance Goes Sideways." The host interviewed Thorne. He didn't mention me directly, but the implication was there. Some children just don't understand legacy. They think independence means turning their backs, but families are systems. If you break one part, the whole thing suffers. My inbox flooded the next morning. Clients asking, "Is this about you?" Friends messaging, "Should we say something?" Former colleagues tiptoeing around the topic. And yet, I wasn't rattled. Because the one thing they forgot was that I kept receipts, literal and metaphorical. I still had the video of the crown, the texts, the audio recording of Vera telling me I acted like trash, the withdrawal notice from my account, the legal documents I'd refused to sign. I kept it all. Not for revenge, for clarity. Because when people try to rewrite history, you better be ready to publish the truth. I opened my file folder labeled Row Estate, Closed. I smiled, not out of spite, out of relief. They wanted to win sympathy, but I knew the game better now. And if they wanted the public's sympathy, they should have hidden the receipts better. I didn't plan it for drama. That wasn't the point. It wasn't some act of revenge or grand theatrical unveiling. If anything, I wasn't sure I'd send the clip at all. I hovered over the Attach File button for a long time, so long the screen dimmed once, then twice, like even my laptop was unsure. But something inside me clicked, a deep, wordless certainty that it was time. The file was small, barely 90 seconds long, but it held 10 years of silence, packed tight like a coil. It started with Vera placing the paper crown on my head, her hands lingering a little too long. The words, "How to Grow Up," were written in glittery gold along the front, ridiculous, juvenile, cruel, in a way that passed as charming if you didn't look too closely. The camera panned over the guests, polite applause, tight smiles, people sipping wine and pretending not to notice the tension simmering just below the tablecloth. The birthday card with Callista's name signed in big swoops. And then my voice, calm, steady, a bit too controlled, as I was told to leave, told I was ungrateful, told I was the problem, told I could find a better way to celebrate elsewhere. Then, me walking out, and finally the front door closing behind me. I didn't know the footage existed until months later. A neighbor had recorded it on their phone, just a sliver of the party, but enough. Enough to show the world what family values looked like behind polished glass. The video came to me in a message from their niece, a young woman I had helped through a scholarship grant I'd organized years ago. She had sent it quietly, carefully. "This isn't right," she wrote. "I thought you should have this." That night, I sat in my apartment, lights dimmed, watching the clip on repeat. It wasn't just what happened, it was how routine it looked, how normal it must have seemed to those in the room, how no one had stepped in. I wrote a short email to a journalist I'd once helped pro bono, back when no one knew my name. She was freelancing now, focused mostly on stories about power and perception, how image often masks reality. Her inbox was probably a graveyard of unread tips, but I figured if she saw the subject line, she'd look twice. Subject: Here's what family values look like behind closed doors. Body: You once said the truth matters more when it's inconvenient. I attached the file. Then I hit send. The video went public 2 days later. It didn't just circulate, it detonated. Within 36 hours, it was everywhere. By day 3, talk shows were dissecting it frame by frame. Local news stations ran commentary segments with titles like The Crown, The Card, and The Collapse. On social media, hashtags bloomed like wildfire. #Crown of Shame, #Astarave, #Family Facade. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a take. Therapists posted stitched responses discussing covert abuse and emotional scapegoating in high-pressure families. Influencers cried on camera, calling it the most chilling birthday clip they'd seen in years. Former classmates, some I hadn't heard from in over a decade, flooded my inbox. Some just sent a single heart emoji. Others wrote long, earnest paragraphs. I had no idea. Or, "This makes so much sense now." I didn't respond. I watched as Thorne's consulting firm quietly lost 3 contracts within the week. Watched as Callista's name was quietly removed from the board of a prominent nonprofit that had once splashed her face across their Women in Leadership campaign. And Vera was caught on camera outside a grocery store, crying, mascara smudged, lips trembling in a way that might have seemed sympathetic if you didn't know the full story. "I never meant to hurt her," she said to the local reporter who ambushed her near the parking lot. "I did what I thought was best. But Astara, she's rewriting everything. She's making us out to be monsters." The woman filming asked, "Did you really make her wear that crown?" Vera didn't answer. The video cut off in silence. I didn't feel satisfaction, not in the gloating sense. There's a line between vengeance and vindication. One comes with heat, with fury, with the impulse to burn it all down. The other comes like a breeze through a window you hadn't realized was locked. Cool, clear, unapologetically clean. One is fire. The other is air. That evening, I sat at my desk, the sun bleeding gold across the hardwood floor. My office was quiet except for the soft whir of the fan. I opened my email and saw a voicemail transcription waiting. Thorn again. "You've destroyed us. Are you proud?" I didn't listen to the audio. I didn't need to. I deleted it and opened a new draft, sent it straight to my lawyer. Subject: termination of remaining trust connections. Body: please proceed with full separation from all family financial ties. I want nothing left to bind us. I clicked send, and then I just sat, not crying, not angry, just still, just free. I opened a new document, titled it, "When Growing Up Means Walking Away." I didn't write it for revenge. I didn't write it to go viral. I wrote it because someone else, somewhere, needed to hear it. Someone stuck in the middle of a smile and nod performance they didn't sign up for. Someone silenced for too long. I typed the opening line, one that had been living in the back of my throat for months. They taught me how to obey, how to stay small, how to be grateful for crumbs dressed up as casseroles, but they never taught me what it meant to grow. And then the words came, not like an avalanche, not like a dam breaking, but like a faucet finally freed of its block. I wrote about being told I was too sensitive, about the way I was ignored when I succeeded but paraded when I stumbled, about how silence was called maturity and boundaries were labeled betrayal. I wrote about the birthday party, yes, but more than that, I wrote about the 1,000 small humiliations that made the crown inevitable. When I was done, I hit save, not publish, not yet. I closed the laptop and turned to the window. The Arlington skyline was starting to glow as night settled in. Lights flickered on in the buildings nearby. Somewhere, laughter drifted up from a rooftop patio. The hum of life continued beyond my walls. My phone buzzed again. Another news alert. Daughter's video exposes quiet abuse behind polished suburbia. I didn't click. I didn't need to. They had lost their version of me. I had finally found mine. The truth didn't just set me free. It unraveled me, slowly, carefully, like a series of quiet knots loosening one by one. I could almost hear the snaps as they gave way, though no one else would have noticed. 2 months had passed since the video had gone viral. The internet, with its insatiable appetite, had long since turned to its next outrage, its next scandal, its next distraction. But for me, the aftermath lingered. Not in the way I had once imagined. There were no celebrations, no grand gestures of vindication, no balloons or banners declaring that I had survived. What came instead was subtler, steadier. A consistent unfolding of peace, like a slow sunrise that you only notice once the world is bathed in light. I found it not in sweeping triumphs, but in the mundane, the ordinary rhythms that no longer carried the weight of fear. Peace came in the mornings I spent prepping slides for a financial literacy seminar, or in the way the kettle whistled when I boiled water for tea. It arrived in the afternoons I spent organizing workshop folders for women who looked far too much like I once did, hopeful, but braced for disappointment. I had begun volunteering at the local community center. Nothing glamorous, nothing flashy, just teaching, listening, guiding. Most of the women I worked with were trying to escape financially manipulative relationships, the kinds of cages that didn't come with bruises, but left you bleeding in places no one else could see. One Saturday morning, I stood at the front of a classroom. The room smelled faintly of dust and instant coffee, folding chairs lined up in uneven rows. Women filled the seats, some younger than me, some older, but all carrying the same quiet wariness in their eyes. It was the look of someone who had been asked to trust one too many times and had learned that hope had teeth. A hand went up from the back. A girl, she couldn't have been older than 20, asked in a voice so soft it was almost an apology, "Are you the woman from that video?" The air stilled for a moment. I could feel all their eyes on me, waiting. I nodded. "Yes, that's me." Another woman sitting near the aisle leaned forward. Her voice was steadier, though it carried its own weight. "What was it like, when it all came out?" I thought for a moment before answering, and when I spoke, I smiled. Not the kind of smile you put on to prove you're fine, but a small, real one. Loud, I said. Then quiet. Then clearer than anything I'd ever heard. A few of them chuckled softly. Others just exhaled, the sound carrying the relief of knowing they weren't alone. I looked around the room, taking in their faces, the guarded way they sat in their chairs. You don't grow up the moment someone tells you to, I said slowly. You grow up the moment you finally decide who you refuse to be. The line earned a gentle ripple of applause. I didn't shrink from it, the way I once would have. I let the sound land, let myself take up space without apology. When the session ended, I packed up my things slowly. A few women lingered. Some asked questions about credit scores, about budgeting, about legal protections. Others shared fragments of their own stories, carefully, but bravely. One of them hugged me before she left. It wasn't tight, wasn't desperate. It was reverent, the kind of embrace you give someone who made you feel seen. By the time I arrived home that afternoon, the sunlight was already slanting low through the windows. I set my bag down, made a cup of peppermint tea, and wandered to the shelf in my office nook. A cedar box sat tucked on the bottom row, hidden behind a stack of old tax files. I pulled it out and set it on the desk. The lid creaked open, releasing a faint scent of aged wood and something softer, lavender, or maybe just the memory of it. Inside was a small photograph. Me and Grandma, when I was 7. We were sitting on the porch steps. Her hand rested gently on my shoulder. Both of us were looking off camera, our faces calm, almost luminous. I don't remember what we were watching, but we looked rooted, like we belonged to ourselves. Beneath the photo lay a folded note in her handwriting. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but the words still carried their weight. To Astara, who always knew when to walk away. I traced the letters with my finger. Underneath it, tucked neatly, was her blueberry pie recipe, written in fading blue ink on an index card. A grease stain marked the corner, a testament to the many times she'd pulled it out in her kitchen. I'd memorized the recipe years ago, but I still kept the card like an heirloom. I propped the note up against the pen holder on my desk, not as a trophy, not as evidence, but as an anchor. The person I had become wasn't angry anymore. She was grounded. She understood that closure wasn't always an apology. Sometimes, closure was just the quiet decision to stop waiting for one, like the unopened letter from Vera. It had arrived only a few days earlier, no return address, but unmistakable handwriting. Inside was a 3-page update. Callista was doing better. Thorne had given up drinking for Lent. The garden was in bloom. There was no apology, no ownership, just updates. I didn't burn it. I didn't tear it up. I folded it back into its envelope and slipped it into the same drawer where I kept old utility bills. That was all it deserved. I didn't need closure from people who still lied to themselves. That night, I met Marisol for dinner at a small cafe by the river. We sat beneath string lights, laughing until our cheeks hurt. We ordered 2 desserts just because, and walked along the water afterward, our voices carrying into the evening. I didn't check my phone once. The weight that had lived in my chest for so long, tight, coiled, unrelenting, had unspooled into something softer. Not gone, not erased, but livable. Back home, before bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. No makeup, no mask, just me. A woman older than she had once been, stronger than anyone had expected, softer in the ways that mattered most. The crown they tried to hand me, the one carved from other people's expectations, I had left it behind, and I had grown into something they never thought possible. Free. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't leaving a toxic family. It's unlearning the version of yourself they trained you to believe in. Astara's story reminds us, love without respect is not love at all. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who was supposed to protect you? Tell us in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe. There's more truth where this came from. Hi there, I'm Maddie. At my own promotion party, the one I thought was for me, my boss gave the role to someone else. Right there, in front of everyone. And I smiled. I toasted. I clapped. But inside, something cracked. I spent 5 years building that company. Stayed late, trained people, fixed messes no one else wanted. And then, just like that, I was invisible. But that wasn't even the worst part. Because what came after, the lies, the silence, the betrayal from people I trusted, it went deeper than any promotion. Tonight was supposed to be mine. I spent hours choosing the right dress, curling my hair just enough, even rehearsing my smile in the mirror like a fool. This night wasn't just another company dinner. It was the night. The one I'd worked 5 years for. I arrived early, watched the servers light the tiny golden bulbs overhead, saw the name cards laid out across the long white tablecloth. My name was in the center, right next to Marston's. I took it as a sign. Every inch of me buzzed with nervous anticipation. For 5 years, I showed up. I cleaned up messes that didn't belong to me, stayed late without being asked, helped new hires feel like they belonged, even when I didn't feel that way myself. I played the long game. I waited my turn. Marston had said it more than once. "You're next, Maddie. I see everything you do." So I believed him. The room filled quickly. Chatter, laughter, the occasional pop of champagne corks. Everyone was in high spirits. Why wouldn't they be? Sales were up, bonuses were on the table, and tonight someone was about to be named our new senior manager. Everyone knew it. I felt it. Marston stood at the head of the table, glass of wine in one hand, his signature smug grin in place. He tapped the glass with his fork, gently, rhythmically. The room silenced like someone had hit pause. My stomach flipped. He looked around the table and smiled. "Tonight," he began, "I want to recognize someone who's truly raised the bar. In a short time, they've brought fresh energy, creative insight, and a level of leadership that's rare." My heart pounded. I tried to breathe slowly, look calm. I even leaned forward a little, just in case the photographer caught my reaction. He continued, "It's not often we see someone step in and make this kind of impact, in just 3 months. 3 months? I blinked. Marston turned slightly toward the other end of the table. "Lyra," he said, raising his glass, "you've done more than we could have hoped for, which is why I'm thrilled to announce your promotion, senior manager, effective immediately." Applause broke out instantly. Glasses clinked. Someone whooped. I sat frozen, smile faltering mid-rise. My hands clenched beneath the table, knuckles white around the stem of my champagne flute. I heard someone say, "She deserves it!" and another voice go, "Well done, Lyra!" The blood drained from my face. 3 months. I'd built half the systems this company still used. I'd rewritten training manuals, recovered client accounts on the brink of collapse, mentored Lyra for God's sake. And now I was watching her soak in praise meant for me. Marston finally looked at me, like he'd only just remembered I was there. "And of course, Maddie," he added, his voice a shade too loud, "we see you too. Your consistency, your loyalty, always appreciated." That was it. No title, no acknowledgement of the late nights, the missed holidays, the birthdays spent at my desk. Just a pat on the head, like I was a well-behaved pet. Then he smirked. "Maybe you could take a page from Lyra's playbook. Adaptability is the name of the game these days." I swear the room tilted. Someone at the far end laughed too loud. Lyra blushed and tried to wave it off. "Oh, stop," she said, but the damage was done. That line, "Take a page from Lyra's playbook," it echoed in my ears like a slap. Marston knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't an accident. It was a message. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I clapped. I smiled. I even leaned toward Lyra and said, "Congrats." Because that's what women like me are taught to do. Be gracious. Be small. Don't make a scene. But inside, something broke. I barely tasted the rest of the meal. I smiled and nodded through conversations I wasn't part of. I laughed at jokes I didn't hear. My body was present, but I was somewhere else, replaying every meeting where Marston had praised me, every time he'd said, "Just hang in there a little longer." Liar. I thought about the email I'd drafted weeks ago, back when I first felt something shift. I hadn't sent it, just saved it in drafts. Just in case, I told myself. But maybe I'd known. After dessert, I slipped out early, unnoticed. The air outside was cool and sharp. It felt like freedom. I stood on the curb for a long minute, phone in hand. I opened my inbox. Found the draft. Subject, resignation, effective immediately. I hovered my finger over send. I wanted to push it. I wanted to walk away. But I didn't. Not yet. I don't know why I stopped myself. Maybe it was hope, some stupid, stubborn part of me, thinking this might all still be a misunderstanding. Or maybe I wasn't ready to burn it all down. Not yet. I barely slept. My pillow still smelled like the hairspray I used for the party, as if it hadn't fully accepted the night was over. I got dressed in silence, skipped breakfast, and walked into the office before most of the lights were on. It felt like walking into someone else's life, familiar, but wrong in ways I couldn't explain. The front desk girl greeted me with her usual fake cheer. "Morning, Maddie! You're early!" I managed a smile, tight and clipped. I made my way past rows of empty cubicles, past the break room still humming from the overnight fridge. My desk was exactly the same, as if the night before hadn't happened, but everything inside me felt cracked, off balance. I sat down, opened my laptop, and stared at my inbox like it might give me a reason not to leave. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I was tired. Maybe Marston just made a poor decision. People mess up. My dad used to say that when Mom caught him lying. It was just a bad call, babe. I'm only human. Somehow, that never made it okay, did it? At 9 sharp, our team gathered for the Friday sync. Marston strolled in 5 minutes late, coffee in hand, like he owned the air around him. The way people laughed at his dry jokes made my stomach twist. "Let's keep this short," he said, settling in at the head of the table. "I know we're all riding high off last night." He glanced around the room like he was proud of himself. "I just want to highlight one incredible piece of work that really pushed our last campaign into the win column. Lyra," he smiled. "Your innovative approach to the digital rollout, that's what made the difference." My eyes shot up. "What?" "That rollout, the concept, the content flow, even the pitch deck, was mine. Every chart, every graphic, every late-night tweak. I had done it. She had helped, sure. She reviewed a few slides. But the entire backbone came from me. People clapped. Someone said, "Nicely done!" I sat frozen. My throat didn't tighten. My chest didn't ache. Instead, I felt a strange hollowness, like my body was there, but I had quietly stepped out of it. Then came the line that snapped me right back in. "That kind of forward thinking," Marston added, "is what leadership looks like." Leadership. He didn't say my name, didn't even glance my way. But I felt the weight of what he was doing. It was calculated. That's what shook me. It wasn't a slip. It was a statement. When the meeting broke, I gathered my things slowly, trying to make sense of it. Inez walked past, leaned in just enough for me to hear. "Wait, didn't you lead that campaign?" I gave the smallest nod. "Yeah, I did." Her eyebrows drew together. She started to say something else, but hesitated. "That's weird," she muttered, then walked away. Weird. That's one word for it. I walked to the kitchen for coffee I didn't want, just to avoid people. Lyra was already there, standing by the counter, chatting with Rachel. When she saw me, she offered a sheepish smile. "Oh, hey, Maddie. I was just saying how the rollout was really a team effort. You laid the groundwork." I stared at her, expression flat. She didn't sound guilty. She sounded coached. Then Marston's voice floated in from the hallway behind us. "That's what I love about Lyra. She doesn't just follow a plan, she owns it." The words hit like ice down my spine. I didn't say a word, just walked back to my desk and opened my personal folder. I pulled up old emails, time-stamped strategy notes, early wireframes, drafts I had sent weeks ago. The evidence was there. But what was I going to do? Send a PowerPoint titled "Proof I Did the Work"? I thought back to the night I stayed until midnight, tweaking that landing page, while the rest of the team drank at some rooftop happy hour. I remembered the look on Marston's face when I first showed him the strategy. Impressed, nodding slowly, saying, "Now this could work." And now, it was Lyra's win. That was the moment something inside me stopped pretending. I didn't storm into his office. I didn't send the email. Not yet. But I stopped trusting smiles, and I started paying attention. And what I began to uncover next made my silence dangerous. I didn't need anyone to say it out loud. The signs were already there. Quiet, subtle, but deliberate. I started noticing little things, like how the weekly strategy call I used to lead was suddenly rescheduled, and I wasn't on the new invite. Or how the email threads about upcoming initiatives included names I barely recognized, but not mine. Even the Slack channel I had created for the fourth quarter campaign, archived without a word. I knew it wasn't paranoia. It was a pattern. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. People get shuffled around, roles shift. But there's a difference between change and erasure. I began paying closer attention, tracking meetings, email chains, calendar invites, watching how decisions were made, and more importantly, who was in the room when they were. One morning, I walked past Inez's desk and casually asked, "Hey, did they move the Q4 Ops planning meeting?" She glanced up from her screen, hesitated, then frowned. No, it's today at 3. "Oh, weird," I said. "I didn't see it on my calendar." She bit her lip, clearly uncomfortable. "I think they switched it to a smaller group. You're not on the list?" My stomach sank. I walked back to my desk without saying a word, opened my access settings, and checked the group permissions. My name had been removed from the committee entirely. No message, no explanation. It wasn't an oversight. It was surgical. That was the day I stopped trying to be patient. The following week, I saw something that made my jaw tighten. Marston assigned a high-profile pitch, one I had been preparing for weeks, to Matt, a junior analyst barely a year out of grad school. I'd already met the client over Zoom twice, even sent a follow-up deck. When I asked Marston about it, he didn't blink. "We thought Matt might bring a fresh energy to the table," he said, shrugging. "Clients like seeing new blood." I stared at him. "You mean young?" He smiled like I was being difficult. "Just trust the process, Maddie. You've had your turn." I wanted to laugh. My turn had been 5 years of quiet consistency, of covering for people like Matt when they forgot deadlines. Now, suddenly, he was the future. I walked into the meeting room later that afternoon and watched Matt fumble through a half-prepped pitch. Marston nodded along like he was watching a prodigy. I sat at the far end of the table, invisible. It wasn't that I wasn't seen. It was that I was being replaced. Not because I wasn't good, but because I was no longer convenient. After that meeting, I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I just went back to my desk and began collecting things. Emails, time-stamped project documents, screenshots of team chats. I opened a private folder on my desktop and labeled it, "If Needed," and then I copied it to an external drive. I wasn't preparing for a tantrum. I was building a record. One night, well after most of the floor had gone home, I sat staring at my monitor in the dark. The only light came from the screen and the city glowing through the glass windows. The silence was comforting, clean, honest. I thought about all the times I stayed late, fixed what others broke, and swallowed my voice to keep the peace. I remembered how Mom used to say, "Sometimes, to keep the family together, you have to be the quiet one." She said that every time Dad forgot her birthday, or came home late, or pretended not to hear her crying in the kitchen. I had carried that same silence into this place, and it was killing me. That Friday evening, as I packed my things for the weekend, Marston walked past my desk with a smirk and clapped Matt on the shoulder. "Now that's what next-gen leadership looks like," he said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I didn't even turn around. Instead, I clicked on the folder marked "If Needed," dragged it onto my external drive, and ejected it. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but I knew this. I wasn't going to keep waiting for someone to rescue me. I was done waiting for fairness to find me. I was done waiting for fairness to find me. The thing about holding it together every day is, eventually, the seams give. Since the promotion slap, each morning felt heavier, like I was walking through air thick with suspicion and fake smiles. Every click of a keyboard, every glance exchanged in a hallway felt loaded. I kept my head down, mostly to avoid giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. But deep down, I knew I wasn't staying quiet out of dignity anymore. It was strategy. I was listening, watching, waiting. Then came Monday. It started like any other. I got in early, poured myself burnt coffee, and opened my laptop. My inbox had 32 unread messages, most of them noise. But one subject line caught me. Recognizing Agile Leadership, Q4 Direction. It was from Marston, sent to the entire division. I opened it slowly, already knowing something was off. His tone was polished, almost warm. As we shift into Q4, I want to spotlight the kind of leadership that reflects the future of our company. Adaptability, innovation, and the courage to challenge the status quo. So far, typical Marston buzzwords. Then came the real punch. Lyra has consistently exemplified these values. Her ability to pivot, execute, and lead with a modern lens has driven results worth emulating. In contrast, we must be mindful that clinging to rigid systems often stifles growth and ultimately becomes a barrier to progress. My name wasn't in it, but I might as well have been printed in bold. The message was clear. Old methods, old voices, like mine, no longer mattered. And Lyra? She was the future, all packaged in a perfectly professional email with just enough deniability to be called harmless. I stared at the screen, heart pounding not from surprise, but from the sick familiarity of it. It reminded me of how my brother used to tell our mom I was overreacting every time he went through my stuff. How he'd smile and say, "I was just organizing, chill," and somehow I'd end up being the problem. This was no different. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it to HR or scream into the void. I just sat there and let it burn. I scrolled through the comments piling up under the message, "Well deserved, Lyra," and "We're lucky to have her," followed by a handful of emojis. And still, not one person asked the question screaming inside me. Where was I in all of this? Inez passed by my desk about an hour later. She leaned in without looking directly at me and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded, barely. Then came a ping. A private message from Chelsea on the marketing team. That email was cold. Just wanted to say I noticed. It was the smallest thing, but it mattered. That someone else saw it. That I wasn't completely insane. Still, the air around me felt like glass. Fragile, sharp, ready to shatter. Around lunch, I slipped away to the restroom and locked myself in the last stall. The noise of the office faded behind the bathroom's sterile silence. My hands rested on my thighs. Still, heavy. I didn't cry. I hadn't in weeks. I think I forgot how. Instead, I seethed. I gave this place the best years of my life, I thought. I canceled vacations, missed birthdays, let relationships fall apart. All because I believed loyalty mattered. And what did they give me? A footnote in someone else's highlight reel. I leaned my head back against the cold wall and whispered, "Not anymore." That evening, as I was packing up, I saw Marston walking out of the conference room. Alone. I didn't plan it. I just moved. Like my feet had already decided for me. "Got a minute?" I asked. He looked surprised but smiled. "For you?" "Always." We stepped into the hallway near the glass doors. I kept my voice calm, measured. "I read your email." "Yeah?" He gave that salesman grin. "Just trying to show appreciation where it's due. That's what leaders do." I nodded. "Appreciation's great, but you might want to be careful about the shade you throw in the process." His brow twitched. "If there's one more message like that," I said slowly, "I won't just leave this company. I'll take everything you pretended wasn't mine, and make sure people see who really built it." He didn't say anything, just stood there blinking, like I'd spoken a language he didn't understand. I turned and walked away. Turns out, he took that as a challenge. A week passed. Quietly, too quietly. No more digs in public emails, no sly remarks. Just silence. The kind that hums beneath your skin like a warning. Then, Monday morning, my calendar pinged. A meeting update. I opened it with a flicker of hope, thinking maybe someone had finally remembered to do their job. Performance review. Rescheduled, to be determined. Reason. Scheduling conflicts. Third time this quarter. Same excuse. I stared at the screen. My hand hovered over the trackpad for a second. Then I clicked delete. The window vanished, but the fire it lit inside me didn't. I stood, grabbed the folder I'd been updating for weeks, and walked straight into Marston's office without knocking. He looked up from his laptop almost amused. "Maddie, hi? Everything all right?" "You tell me," I said. 3 delays, no explanation, and the year's almost over. He leaned back, that same corporate casual tone ready on his tongue. "We're still compiling feedback from your peers, cross-checking project outcomes. You know how it is." "You've had 5 years of feedback," I said, setting the folder on his desk. "All of it's right there. Client retention, campaign success, onboarding results, employee mentorship. Everything I've done while you kept dangling that title like it was candy on a string." He didn't even open the folder. "This isn't personal, Maddie." "You're right," I said, voice flat. "It's calculated." His smile faltered. "You've been using bureaucracy to keep me in place. You know exactly how much weight that review holds, for promotions, raises, credibility. And you've postponed it over and over like my work doesn't matter. Or like I don't." He tilted his head, folding his hands. "I think you're getting too emotional. You don't want to make impulsive moves right now." I almost laughed. "My father used to say the same thing every time he forgot a promise," I said. "Don't overreact. It's not a big deal. But when you keep doing it, that's not a mistake. That's a message." Marston's eyes narrowed. "You need to be careful, Maddie. You start escalating this, it can burn bridges. Doors don't always reopen." I leaned in slightly. "I'm not looking for open doors anymore. I'm building my own." He tried to say something else, but I was already walking out. Back at my desk, I sat down and exhaled. Not relief, not anger. Something deeper, something final. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had facts, I had receipts, and I wasn't asking for a seat at the table. I was about to flip the table. A few minutes later, a small icon popped up in the corner of my screen. Read, receipt. Your message, Q3 reporting accuracy, has been opened. Timestamp, today, 11:42 a.m. By Admin Override. That email was from 6 weeks ago. There was no reason anyone should be reading it now. Then came another alert. Security check in progress. Admin access detected. I froze. They were digging, so they were done pretending too. The alert stayed on my screen longer than it should have. My cursor hovered over the little red X in the corner, but I didn't click it. I just stared at the words, admin access triggered, like they might blink away if I waited long enough. They didn't. I clicked into the back end of my account, the audit logs tucked away in a hidden panel most employees never think to check. I'd only learned about it because I'd trained new hires before, back when I was still trusted, back when I still believed I belonged here. There it was. 3 instances of internal override logins tied to my credentials. One last Thursday, one over the weekend, one this morning. I felt it first in my stomach. A churn, a clench. Not fear, not shock. Just something like disgust. That quiet kind of disgust you feel when someone you once trusted rifles through your drawers and then acts like you're overreacting. I stood up slowly, grabbed my badge, and headed toward the IT department. The hallway felt colder than usual, like the walls themselves were watching me. When I walked into the tech wing, the room hushed. Not in a dramatic way, just enough to make me sure I'd interrupted something. Ben, a junior support tech, glanced up. "Hey, Maddie, everything okay?" I smiled, polite but tight. "Quick question. Was there any routine maintenance done on my email account lately?" He paused. I could see it in his eyes. He knew, or at least he'd heard something. "I mean, sometimes there's back-end syncing for access logs, archiving, that kind of thing," he said, choosing each word like they were eggshells. "Right," I nodded. "But would that include an executive override?" He froze for half a second, then said, "There was a request, from above. We just follow access protocols." I held his gaze. "I get it. It's never personal when you're the one holding the key, right?" He didn't answer. I thanked him, turned, and walked out. My steps were calm, my face was still, but something inside me had clicked into place. Back at my desk, I pulled out my external drive and opened the folder labeled "If Needed." I added screenshots of the override logs, labeled them, time-stamped everything. Then I opened a blank document and began writing my resignation letter. It started clinical, cold. Then I stopped, deleted 2 paragraphs, and rewrote it. Not softer, but sharper. I kept it factual, professional, but not apologetic. Next, I drafted another document. This one was titled Workplace Misconduct, Internal Breach, bullet points, evidence links, policy violations, a clear timeline, no emotion, just data. No matter what they'd find in my inbox, they couldn't erase the pattern they'd left behind. At 2:12 p.m., I sent the resignation letter to HR. I CC'd the legal team. The subject line was simple: formal resignation, effective immediately. I ended the message with one line: "I will be available for documentation handover. I will not be available for further discussion." Then I logged out. People stared as I stood up and calmly placed my company badge in an envelope. Inez watched me from her desk, wide-eyed. A few others stopped pretending to type. Nobody said anything. I didn't owe them a goodbye. As I zipped my bag and slung it over my shoulder, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Is this Madeline Pierce?" a familiar voice asked. "Yes." "We've been waiting for you," he said, smooth and clear. "Can you start Monday?" It was Dorian Hale. And just like that, I wasn't walking out empty-handed. I was walking into something bigger. The second I stepped off the elevator and out into the cold Seattle air, I sent one text. "Need 10 minutes. Meet me in the back room." Inez replied within seconds. "Give me 5. We met in the small, forgotten conference space near HR. Glass-walled, quiet, and usually empty by design. I dropped my bag, plugged in my drive, and told her everything. The admin overrides, the deleted meetings, the surveillance, and the call. "Dorian Hale?" she whispered, brows lifted. "The Dorian Hale?" I nodded. "He's already offered. I start Monday." Inez didn't smile. Instead, she exhaled through her nose and said what only real allies say. "Good. But before you go, you need to see this." She pulled up her own laptop and opened a file she'd been quietly collecting. "I've been digging," she said. "Something's always felt off about Lyra's file." She clicked into the HR system and pointed. "Look, no application timestamp, no interview notes, no internal referrals. It's blank until this." A system log appeared on the screen. Manual insert. Executed by admin, sat exec override. August 2nd, 2023. I blinked. That's 2 days before Lyra started. Then she said it. "Her last name used to be Ryland." I froze. Inez nodded. "Marston's ex-wife's maiden name." It hit like a punch I should have seen coming. The sudden rise, the rehearsed humility, the constant praise. Of course. "That's why she got it all handed to her," I said slowly. "It was never about her being good. It was about him protecting bloodlines. Inez's eyes met mine, and hiding it like a coward. I stood there for a moment, letting the truth settle into my bones. Then I opened my laptop and began typing. I titled the document, Leadership Ethics and Internal Conflicts of Interest. I attached the admin log screenshots, the HR anomalies, the chain of performance reviews skipped, and my own resignation letter. The timeline comparison was brutal. 5 years of documented wins versus 3 months of executive favoritism. By noon, I sent the memo directly to the board. Then I did one more thing. I requested a farewell Zoom. Told HR I wanted to thank the team, end things on a positive note. They approved it without question. At 4 p.m., faces filled the screen, 50, maybe more. Marston joined 5 minutes in, smiling like he hadn't tried to erase me from the company entirely. I cleared my throat and spoke calmly. Thank you, everyone, for the memories, for the growth, for the laughter, and for the silence. Because it was in that silence that I learned the loudest truths. The chat paused. I won't name names, I don't need to, but I want to leave you all with something useful, something about power, and how it never looks like power when it's dressed as a compliment. Someone unmuted and whispered, "Oh, wow." I smiled. If you ever feel like your voice is too small to matter, remember this. The ones who silence you are always the ones most afraid of being heard. Then I clicked End Call. 2 minutes later, Inez messaged me. The board just went into an emergency session. Marston's face looks like he saw a ghost. I powered down my laptop. I didn't want to see what came next. Not yet. For now, I stepped outside, let the wind hit my face, and allowed myself, for the first time in years, to breathe. That night, I slept for 9 hours straight. For the first time in years. There was no tossing, no staring at the ceiling while replaying conversations, no anger tucked beneath my ribs, keeping my breath shallow. I just rested. And when morning came, I opened my eyes to golden light spilling across the hardwood floors of my new apartment. My body felt different, like it belonged to me again. 2 weeks had passed since I walked out of that glass tower with nothing but a flash drive and my spine intact. And today, I walked into something better. Carter and Associates wasn't flashy. It was sharp, lean, built by people who still believed in doing good work for the right reasons. The office smelled like clean wood and ambition. Dorian met me near the elevator, hands in his pockets, smile relaxed. "You made it," he said. "I told you I would." He nodded once. "Let's get started." We were in his office later that morning, going over project histories and upcoming initiatives, when he leaned back in his chair and said casually, "You know, I actually sent you an offer 6 months ago." I looked up. "What?" He shrugged. "Through your work email. Never heard back. Figured maybe you weren't ready." My pulse quickened. "You sent it where?" "Your old company account." I froze. That was around the same time things started getting quiet. When meetings went missing, when Lyra suddenly bloomed. "Can you forward me that original message?" I asked. "I just want to check something." Dorian did. I opened my personal backup logs, found the audit trail for that date, and there it was. Message received. Deleted by admin override. No forwarding rule set. I stared at the screen. They hadn't just passed me over. They actively blocked my exit, tried to trap me, keep me small, invisible, like I owed them something. I didn't say a word to Dorian. I just smiled and said, "Thanks." That week, it started. First, a call from Dawson and Company. "Maddie, we heard you moved. Can we talk?" Then, a message from Graybridge Capital. "You're at Carter now? Our account's up for review." By Friday, 3 of the largest clients I'd brought in over the years had reached out. None of them needed convincing. They weren't loyal to a company. They were loyal to people. People who did the work. People like me. I didn't gloat. I didn't post a single thing online. But I did open a blank draft to Marston. I typed, "I know about the blocked offer. I know about the files. I know about everything. You underestimated the wrong person. Then I stared at it and deleted it. He knew. That was enough. Late that afternoon, I stepped out onto the rooftop terrace. Seattle's skyline stretched in every direction, painted in deep autumn gold. The wind tangled in my hair, and I closed my eyes, not to escape, but to feel fully present. My phone buzzed. Inez. She sent a single screenshot. Internal memo. Board decision. Effective immediately, Marston Whitmore will be stepping down from his role as executive director. This decision reflects recent leadership missteps and concerns raised by clients and internal stakeholders. An interim will be appointed until further notice. Beneath it, her text. You did it. It's done. I smiled. Not because I won, but because I'd finally let go of needing to. But victory wasn't the point. Freedom was. December came in quietly, with frost tracing the edges of the windows and a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. The day I stepped into my new office, corner view, clean desk, my name etched in silver on the glass, I didn't feel like I had conquered anything. I just felt home. There was no tension in my shoulders, no fire to prove myself. People nodded when I passed, not out of obligation or fear, but with that calm, unspoken respect you only earn when they know you've walked through fire and didn't flinch. I opened my laptop, sipped my coffee, and let myself settle. Inez called around noon. It's official, she said. The board confirmed it. Marston's out. Full separation. No return clause. I leaned back in my chair, eyes scanning the city outside. I'm not surprised, I replied. And I wasn't. But I also didn't celebrate. I didn't toast to karma or blast some empowering playlist. I just sat in the quiet and let the moment be what it was. He was gone. That was enough. The next morning, an unexpected name landed in my inbox. Lyra Whitmore. The subject line, I'm sorry. I clicked, mostly out of curiosity. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how much was being done behind the scenes. I thought he believed in me. I read the words twice. Then I closed the email and let it sit there, unread again. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a blank note on my desktop and wrote, Some apologies are too late, but forgiveness doesn't always need a recipient. I'd spent so long trying to be seen, to be validated by people who had no intention of recognizing me, and somewhere in the process, I forgot that my voice didn't require permission. It just needed space. This new chapter gave me that. I still caught myself flinching at certain tones, still paused before speaking in meetings, waiting for the ghost of dismissal to show up, but it never did. And slowly, I began to trust the quiet again. One afternoon, sitting in a cafe near the office, I found myself journaling. I used to think power came from being chosen. Turns out, it comes from choosing yourself. I wrote it down without thinking, then added, I used to fear being replaced. Now I know, what I bring can't be replicated. A reflection in the cafe window caught my eye. Mine. Older than I remembered, stronger too. A young intern from Carter passed by, nearly tripping over his own feet as he tried to wave and walk at the same time. I smiled and called out, Hey! If you ever feel small here, come find me. No one builds alone. He nodded, surprised, grateful, and I went back to my coffee. That moment wasn't loud. It didn't need to be, because sometimes the loudest thing a woman can do is stay. Stay grounded, stay clear. Stay in the room when the room once tried to erase her. Before we wrap up this story, let me leave you with something real. If there's one thing I've learned, one thing I wish someone had told me earlier, it's this. Your worth is not up for negotiation, not in boardrooms, not in relationships, not in silence. If they only see your value when you're halfway out the door, that's not a home, that's a trap. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the bravest way to begin again. And maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've felt overlooked, underestimated. Maybe you've swallowed your voice one too many times just to keep the peace. If that's you, I see you. and I hope my story helps you stand a little taller. Now let me ask you, have you ever had to fight for your own value? Have you ever been passed over for someone who didn't earn it? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. Drop a 1 if this video spoke to you, or tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if this video didn't land for you, that's okay too. Let me know why. Let's talk about it. This space is about honesty, not perfection. If you're still watching and this message touched you even just a little, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. There's more where this came from, more truth, more stories that matter. And who knows? The next one might just be yours. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, keep choosing yourself.